practice assessment for the number achievement standard about going to Denmark. First of all, this is made up, so the currency value is not really realistic. In the future I may make another one that really does reflect the exact kind of currency, but we're just going to assume that that is the case there. Right, so we've got here Rachel and Tom and their 4 children are planning to travel to Denmark for a holiday. They plan to be there for 11 nights. Use the following information to find out how much money they'll need to raise for their trip and how many boxes of ice cream they need to sell to complete their fundraising. So this is an example of an NCEA assessment where you have several things such as fractions, percentages, money in the bank over a number of years, ratios over here as well, adding or subtracting GST, and also the currency exchange rate. Right, so we start with what we've got here of the amount that they need to spend each day at Denmark. So we've got $440 per day. All you have to do is multiply that by 11 days and you get 4,840 as your result. Mind you, there is a little bit of leeway and room for something slightly different if you like. You could, if you wanted to, change that to 10 days. You could argue that they might arrive at night time and then leave in the morning, meaning that it'd be one extra night and only 10 days. If you really assumed that, you could write down your assumption and you would actually get it just as correct as what we've got here using 11 days, but you just need to write down any assumptions that you make. There is more than one solution and there are quite a number of valid assumptions that a person can make in doing these kind of assessments. Alright, we've got another next thing here is the cost of the return airfares are $3,500 plus GST. Now the easiest way of doing this, calculating this, is just to multiply by 1.15. Now we know that GST is 15%. We know that there are 2 adults, and so if we just scroll down, the cost of adults airfares are 3,500 times 2 times 1.15, and how we get this 1.15 is it's a little bit more than 1 times, a little bit more in other words than 3,500. That's where you get this 15%, this 1.5 here. It's 15% times 1.15, and that will give you the total adult airfare of $8,050. In the same way, we've got the children's airfare, and each child is $2,300, and you've got to add the GST to that of 15% in the same way. But there's 4 children, so we've got cost of children's airfares 2,300 times 4, because there's 4 of them, times 1.15, which is a way of adding GST to it, and then you've got your final result written there. Okay. Be aware, please, that you've got to start with a label, a calculation, and a result. And one thing that a lot of people make a mistake in, they've really got to get used to this as well, try to keep your calculation to a single thing between 2 equals values here. Now what a lot of people will do, for instance, is that they will go and write down okay, children's airfare is 2,300 times 4 equals, and whatever that is equal to, and then you go times 1.15. And it's hard to show you here, but it actually doesn't make a lot of sense. If you go 2,300, well, okay, that's 4600, and then we've got 9200. And then if you write down equals 9200 times 1.15, well, it's actually not equal to 9200 times 1.15. It's equal to 9200, full stop. Alright, some people write down the last little bit. Okay, we're gonna go times 1.15, but technically that would be actually wrong if you wrote down equals 9200 times 1.15. in there. So that's why, I hope you understand it, because I haven't really written it down or just said it verbally there, but try to just stick to one solid calculation here. Do the whole lot in one go. Okay, you can do several steps in one go here. We've multiplied by 4, we've also multiplied by 1.15, all in one step, completely one step, and then we've got our result there. It's the easiest way, and it's set out perfectly, and you can easily read it there too. Okay. Next bit is total airfares. This is simply adding those to the adult airfare here, adult airfare of that there, plus the children's airfare of that there, is equal to the total airfare. Now we'll get on to Rachel's brother's contribution. So Rachel's brother will contribute 2/7 of the cost of their airfares. Now notice that I've left out this little bit here, this bit about the bank. Now you don't have to do it in order. I just found, well, it's a little bit better perhaps if we just get into that little savings bit a bit later on, but you could do it straight away if you want to. I just don't think it's relevant at the moment. We're going to work out, we're just going to subtract. We've already talked about airfares, so I thought, well, we'll continue to talk about airfares. We'll deal with the airfare stuff to begin with. Alright, so that's the logic behind doing the airfares first. Now she has contributed, or she will contribute 2/7. What is the remaining contribution in terms of a fraction? Well, the remaining fraction that has to be paid by these people, family, is 5/7. Alright, so if 2/7 has been taken out because somebody else has paid for Rachel's brother, then there's only 5/7 of the amount left. So if we look at the total here, times the total of the airfares there, times 5/7, we end up getting this amount. That's the amount that they have to pay towards the airfares. Next bit, times aren't will subsidise the money needed 3 to 7. Okay, let's just see whether we've actually done that next. No, we've done the volcano, so let's just do that in order that we've done it here. And there are different ways of doing this, but we'll just stick to the plan here. Just realise you could do something else next if you wanted to. It doesn't really matter, you can do it in any order. Us in Denmark, they plan to go on a tour of volcanoes. It will cost 8,500 Denmark dollars, and 1 New Zealand dollar is equal to 87.3 Denmark dollars. So notice that there's less New Zealand dollars, 1, and we get more Denmark dollars, 87.3. Alright, so I could choose to either go this 8,500 times 87.3 or divided by 87.3. Well, which one? You might ask, well, which one do I use? Obviously, multiplying by 1 or dividing by 1 is not going to make any difference. So we can just ignore that 1 there, and we'll deal with just the 87.3. But do we times by 87.3 or do we divide by it? Well, the best way of just looking at it is just try out either way and see whether it actually makes sense. Just take a guess. Alright, we'll try just, if we look at dividing here, divide the 8,500 by 87.3, we get 97.37. Now let's just check to see whether that is indeed, well, whether it makes sense or not. So we had a lot of Denmark dollars, 8,500. Now we've got less than 100 New Zealand dollars. Is that what we want? Notice that over here there are a lot more in the ratio, a lot more Denmark dollars than there are New Zealand dollars. So let's just see, does that match what we've got over here? A lot more Denmark dollars, 8,500, and less New Zealand dollars. So yes, it does match. We want to match that ratio, how that ratio looks. Is there more New Zealand or is there less? There's less New Zealand dollars, and that's what we've got over here. That's what we need, and so we've done it correctly. You can just guarantee that that is done correctly. If indeed you use times instead, you would have got a very high New Zealand dollar, New Zealand amount, and that's not what we want. It would not match this ratio over here where the New Zealand dollars have to be less. Alright, let's go to the next bit over here. We've got the total cost is the amount that they need when they're spending money in Denmark, which is 4,840, plus we've got the amount here after Rachel's contribution, the amount that they had to pay for the airfares. The family has to pay that amount. Okay, so we're adding that together, and we're also adding together the amount for the volcano, the trip to the volcano. So all in New Zealand dollars, of course. So the total cost is going to be this one here, 18,244 and 51 cents. Try to round everything to 2 decimal places, by the way. And if a third decimal place does at some point end up being 5 or more, then you're going to have to round up the second decimal place to 1 more. Okay. We've done that. We've got our total for the cost of the trip. Now we need to get or do some other things here as well. Well, let's go to Tom's savings in the bank. So he started with 4,000 in the bank at an interest rate of 4.8% per annum, and it was going to be in there for 5.5 years. Okay, so we don't really have time to explain the reason why. Maybe in another video I could show you the reason why behind this, but we'll just look at the practical application of it at the moment. What you do simply is go 4,000 times 1.04 followed by 8. Now this is, just forget the 0.8 at the moment, this is 4% and there's a bit more. If you did times 1.4, that would be 40%. The 0.4 would amount to 40%. 0.5 is 50%, 0.1 is 10%, so it's going to have to be 0.04, and then next decimal place has to be written in there as well, 8 after that, and that will have to be to the power of the number of years, to the power of 5.5 years. So let's have a look at what we've written over here. We've got 4,000 times 1.048 to the power of 5.5. Once again, a single calculation between the two equal signs is the best way of writing it in. And then and everything, I'm telling you, everything in this achievement standard can be done with single line calculations and a single calculation between two equals. You start with your label followed by your calculation followed by your result, and between that bit that you put in your calculator you're going to have two equal signs right there written down. Okay, so that's what it comes out to be, 5,176.63. Alright, so we've got also the fundraising. You need to subtract that from the amount. The total cost of this trip is going to be this amount. They also have that savings there, so they don't need that to save up that much. So let's just get rid of that out of the, take that away from the cost of a trip. Let's assume they've already paid for that. Well, they've got the money for that anyway. So how much more money do they need to save? They've got, if we subtract that from a total, the amount of money they've got in the bank from a total, then we get $13,067.88. Right, so now we need to work out Tom's aunt's contribution. Now the reason why we've left that is a little bit later. Now we've left it later for a reason, because if you looked at over here, Rachel's brother's contribution, that was towards the airfares. So we did that with the airfares, it's already sorted out. However, this Tom's aunt, this is something else. This is the money needed to be raised, 3 to 7. So this is the amount at the end after they work out how much they need to raise, and a certain portion is going to be contributed by the aunt, by Tom's aunt. So we've worked out how much needs to be raised is this much here, and then if we look at Tom's aunt's contribution, so So it's really better to have a look at this whole thing. If we did 10 different squares all the way along here, I've shown this before in class, but if you have 10 squares, just imagine 10 squares across here, and then if you shaded 3 of them in and left the other 7 unshaded, well, there's 10 altogether. The shaded amount is the amount that Tom's aunt is going to pay, which is 3 out of 10, 3 tenths. Alright, so 7 tenths is the amount that they need, that the couple here need to have of their own. The rest of it will be given by the aunt. So we'll just take 7 tenths of the amount that we've got there. So and that will give us how much they need to save. How much they need to raise money for, because the rest of the money is going to be paid for by the aunt. So this is a way of multiplying it by 7 tenths here. I've just written in the word total in there. I hope it's not confusing. A 10 is a total of that 3 plus 7. That's what I mean by that. And this total over here is really just referring to that total there. So you could, on your calculator, multiply by 7 tenths if you wanted to, but I've put this in here in case you have a dead old calculator that doesn't do fractions. Well, you could also just divide by 10 to get 1 square. I was talking about all those squares, and then multiply by 7 to get 7 of the squares. So that's effectively taking 7 tenths of this total anyway. It's just another way of doing it. And you end up with this much here, and that's how much they need to raise. Alright, so now we get to the last little bit here. We're selling ice cream, and we know that got to work out the profit. Now let's just have a look back there. I'm just trying to remind myself of what we're doing here. Ice cream for $60 each, and this includes a profit of 45%. Okay, now that profit of 45% is already in there, just like GST is already in there. If we already include GST, we've already got it in there. So we're going to try and remove that 45%. But it's not the same way of taking off 45%, say you saw in a supermarket or a shop or Briscoe's or whatever it was, 45% off. Now that would be to work out the final value. In that case here you would go times 0.55 because 55% is remaining. But actually this is slightly different from that, because that would be the normal price. You'd look at it, say $100 item, take off 45%, you end up with $55. But we're actually looking at the final value here, the final value of $60. Whereas if it was an item sold, say at Briscoe's for $100, and you're looking at that former value, the first value, 45% is taken off the former value, the first value, and then the final value is $55. Whereas here it's something totally different. We have a final value of $60, and the 45% is based upon that final value, not the initial former value. Now I hope some of you understand. If you don't understand that, because I know it does sound a bit confusing, if we're looking at something that looks like it's future tense or final, then you've got to divide by 1 point in this little thing here, 45. Alright, so that's what we're going to do. 60 divided by 1.45. So we've got over here $60 divided by 1.45 will give you the value that has that 45% removed from it there. Okay, so removing the 45% that was put in earlier on. Okay, so that's our value there without the 45%, and what we're going to do is work out now the boxes of ice creams that you need to actually sell in order to save up that amount of money that they need. So we know that there is Okay, and just having a look at this here. So $9,147.52 is the amount there that they need to use. Profit per box of ice cream is, oh okay, yes, we're just working out the profit per box of ice cream is this one minus this one. Okay, so we needed to work out the profit, which is at 45 thing there. Okay, so $18.62 is how much profit that you're going to make per box of ice cream. So we do need to work that out first. How much profit for each box of ice cream? $60 is the original amount. Get rid of the amount that doesn't have a profit in it. Okay, so it's a little bit confusing here, I guess, but we end up with now the profit that you have for each box of ice cream is $18.62. Alright, so we need to have that for every single box of ice cream. We're going to get that amount of profit, and we've got this amount that they need to save up. We simply divide the two of them there. That much there divided by how much profit we get from each of them to work out how many boxes that we need. And it works out to be 191.27. Well, you're going to have more than that, slightly more, round it up rather than down. Okay, there's a reason, even though it looks like it might need to be rounded down, well, you actually have to have more. If you don't have enough money, even if it's slightly off, when it comes to saving up money, you actually have to have more than the decimal value here. You've got to round it up to the or you won't be able to afford it. The amount, you'll never end up with that amount that you need. Okay, so we're rounding up to up. Always round up here. In this case here to 492 boxes that we need to sell in order to make the fundraising amount.